So this is some more of my profession-related work. Um, Again, you know, I study topics such as laziness and problems with commuting in Manhattan, things related to economics. Um, Laziness is important in economics because there's people that burn out at work and or they just become lazy at work, and it's not always evident why, and I believe that the way it's addressed was not perfect. Um, have my exit exams here. So again, um, I've done the work to come to understand this subject matter. Um, so in looking at areas such as these that are economically struggling, socially struggling, maybe even culturally struggling and stuff, you know, what's needed? Well, we have what I could remember here and stuff. Vocational rehab, performance medicine, occupational medicine, and stuff. These are all important because these improve and can rehabilitate, workers, parents, friends, and stuff. People that have those important roles. There's so many important roles. Complex data collection and yeah, there has to be proper ethical data collection on all of these aspects here to understand, to keep track of the position and everything. Data gathering has been in important relevant history, has been uh, involved in a lot of in privacy violations and in making people do things that they don't want to do, which is an economic crime. Um, but you know, I I'm of the firm position that data gathering should be ethical. We just want to understand the important aspects of the position of the different organizations and the related systems and stuff. You know, from the home to traffic to other organizations to make sure everything is secure and going to run well. We have tools and stuff. Every hammer, every jackhammer, bulldozer stuff is very important and consequential. I'm just checking to make sure the sound is recording. Um, the circulation of currency and other rewards is very important. Um, and with each of these aspects, you're going to need a certain amount of personnel. And however, the constraints here is that there's only so much. Um, because the constraints of the rewards and energy, there's the political organizations, which are another important aspect of it, have to perform well in determining the right criteria for who gets what and who gets to do what. Um, so yeah, and here we have diversity and stuff. I did a video on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and one of its benefits. I mean, now has it been executed well in the past? Well, I mean, the opinions vary on that and stuff because people's experience and data varies on that stuff. But this is the United States, and this is not one of our only important this is not one of our only important values, but it's also integral. It's also been integral to our development and stuff, and to sustaining us because different types of people generate different ideas and stuff, and um, that's to whatever degree it's important, it's still important. So yeah. Now, as far as operators, and you have break-even operators and stuff. People that just do well enough to return things back to where they were and stuff. Um, you have beneficial operators and stuff. You have innovators, uh, good workers. You have good faith actors, or ethical actors. You have uh, you know people like that. So operators here is a way of casting the concept of a person as into their economically working parts, as is related to value. So, which is important because, I mean, for the obvious reasons and stuff. If it's not valuable and stuff, it's probably not even recyclable. It's nothing you can assemble with or do anything with, it, regardless whether it's personnel and material and stuff. Regardless of whether it's valuable is an ethical actor or it's snacks like I have here. So um, operations and stuff. This is a sum total of processes that are that are related to each other. They spatially cohabit each other. They can dynamically change and stuff that relate to each other. The business operations, organization operations, traffic operations, and stuff. Which is why logistics and management, logistics and transportation is important. Logistics listed twice. Um, you know, Logistics also ties into supply chains, which is important. Then we have oh, yeah, the importance of broad choice of jobs. Um, you have culture as well. For some example, people have their preferred languages and stuff. They have their preferred. Where's when it comes to culture, people have a lot of different perspectives on religion and stuff that are valid for their own reasons. Um, Economies need information too. Information is important because, for the reasons that I talked about before, it modifies the address of material and personnel and stuff. It's the difference between people and organizations making winning plays or beneficial plays and making plays that that just lose or cause some serious problems. Raw materials. As far as raw materials go, this is where we need quantum physics and stuff. Quantum physics is going to be the basis for taking energy, minting it into massive energy and stuff. Like the type of massive energy that can form, raw elements and stuff, which can build up the molecules and the molds, and eventually, the nanomaterials and materials and stuff, and all kinds of materials and stuff. You know, Regardless of whether it's medicine or steel or whatever is needed to answer the possibilities that are coming ahead. And there's quite a few possibilities, both dire and not, that we will have to address as a civilization, which is why it's important to help to focus on the areas that where the need is the greatest and stuff, and not just the areas that are that generate tons of revenue and stuff. I guess we'll have to address areas. One example is Manhattan. Dallas. Nevada. Okay, so it's just examples of some areas that generate a lot of revenue. So what else is needed to build an economy and stuff? Not an economy for just one person, but for a community and stuff. It's called raw materials, technological research and development, scientific research and development and stuff. Um, in, yeah, intellectual facility and stuff. Intellectuals naturally tend to be the minority in populations throughout history, but they serve, but they have a purpose of of modifying the address of material and personnel and stuff. They're the ones that utilize such a high amount of information and stuff. When educated well and stuff, they really become effective and beneficial to the civilizations that they're in and stuff. Unfortunately, some intellectuals just don't have a good education. They're not really intellectuals. They may be highly prolific and everything, um, and but their actual intelligence is kind of dog water and stuff because it just doesn't. There's no intellectual performance. Um, it's just how it is. Maybe I don't know how many intellectuals fall into that category, but no. The other thing about intellectuals is that they take considerable. It's rather complicated and sensitive to develop them and stuff because they require a certain type of nutrition, educational program, and training and stuff to cultivate that character. And it's not really known whether they're going to do something that's good for the world around them and stuff. With area of most focus being the United States of America and stuff. One intellectual that I know that did something huge was William James Sidis and stuff. He decrypted the wampum and stuff, so people could understand, the meaning of wampum for Native Americans and that culture to revitalize, that good aspect of the culture and stuff. It's important records. That's one example of many, many. Um, we could talk about Thomas Edison and Nikola Tesla as well. Benjamin Franklin. Basically, all these are developed by economic prerogative and stuff. You don't want the energy and resources to get out of hand and stuff. When energy and resources get out of hand and stuff, it's basically as good as waste. It's as good as waste. So, yeah. And additionally, there's aspect of economic competition and strategy and stuff. You know, that has to happen as well. Um, of course, economies need law enforcement and stuff. You don't necessarily. The thing about laws is that they're transmissive in nature and stuff because laws um, make human nature behave in a different way. When somebody's very focused on something, um, if there's a lawful proceeding that needs to be met and stuff, or there's a penal code related to that process, then it's um, if you have so many malum prohibitums and stuff, then it's going to drain energy. Eventually, you get a population. You just exacerbate the problem of overcrowding in prisons, or law enforcement already has plenty of work. They have to be a 24/7 public safety organization and stuff, and it's like a paramilitary thing and everything. They have plenty of work without needing to um, penalize people for parking crooked and stuff like that. Um, so, yeah, civilizations have to be very careful with how many laws they implement. Um, but of course, they need to guarantee that there's going to be, adverse actions or dire consequences for doing certain things. Like civilizations cannot have theft, they can't have disruption, they can't have violence, they can't have um, they can't have sexual assault, they can't have child abuse, they can't have bullying and stuff like that. And like all of this is degenerative and stuff. The people who do this are the degenerative operations, which should degenerative operators and stuff, which should be deprecated and stuff. That sort of behavior should not be encouraged and stuff. And how civilization should address it is, pick more rewards for doing the right thing and stuff, and harder punishments for doing bad things and stuff. This is a good way to encourage people to start respecting lawful proceedings, and start doing the right thing, and and benefiting civilization more, and of course doing better for themselves too, because people still have to take care of themselves. Life cannot be lived for a person. It's just not how it works out. Um, so yeah, again, we have data gathering here. That can be taken out to kind of simplify this. There's some examples of intellectual facilities here that's needed and stuff. Civilizations without any intellectuals, they go south. They go bad pretty fast. So you basically, what you end up is what is basically just a factory and stuff, which is not only a vulnerability, but it's out of hand and stuff. It's a civilization without brains. Here we go, waste and byproduct rendering and stuff. Every process in an economy is going to have waste or byproducts, or at least it's how it is now and how it's always been. Um, but that has to lead up to proper recycling. Um, and recycling also touches on the utilization of raw materials, which has to be answered with transmutation and transformation and stuff. Transmutation is extremely important and stuff. That should be one of the goals of quantum physics and stuff. Improvements, yeah, of course. I mean, for economies to improve and stuff, they have to be met with other things and stuff to make the processes of improvement, the mission of those processes of improvement more successful and stuff. Economies need to repair, need to maintenance, upgrading, defense, improvement, development, quantitative projections, planning and strategy and stuff. The quantitative aspect is great because what the quantitative part does is it takes these complex systems and it boils them down to their essential parts and stuff, so calculation becomes easier and stuff. That's one of the practical applications of mathematics and computer science and stuff like that. Computer science is an outgrowth of mathematics, which works extremely well with math. So yeah, that's good. Economies in human capital too. Thinking skills, critical thinking, idea generation, idea pruning, sense, effective skills. Some great skills, that have emerged are biohacking. Medical science is also always great. Scientific skills, cyber skills, mechanical, electrical repair, operations research, financial engineering, and clean water, of course. Some clean water sources have minerals and stuff, and they're just very sanitary and nutritious and stuff. Minerals are very important. If yeah, I mean, so important. Economies, and of course, in businesses and business types, they need culture. as well. I think. Uh, yeah, okay. Digital economy is great too because they just work very fast. So, you know, doing investment trades and bartering and buying and selling through, these and cryptocurrencies and stuff. This is all some examples of, wealth creation, um, which is really good for bringing up the area, the most impoverished, lagging areas and stuff. Um, but yeah, I mean, this is everything I can remember about like what's the component of a full-size, fully developed economy and stuff. Um, I don't want to talk about military stuff too much because it's just not. It wouldn't be appropriate to talk about. It's just it could be a dangerous topic and stuff. Just like I won't talk about what makes effective law enforcement and stuff. That could be very dangerous. Yeah, I mean, if economy has at least one vigilante, then that's good and stuff. Especially the vigilante is well informed. Um, so yeah, yeah, no, that's definitely needed and stuff. The reason being is because law enforcement tends to have to follow a lot of rules, and they already have a lot of work to do. We can't rely on the government and corporations to do everything. It's every time we, not every time we've done it, but it's just it has a tendency. It's very overloading. And so we're about 380 million people. It's just how it is. But yeah, I think I've covered everything about what should be looked at in each of these areas and how to address it. As far as areas of high return and stuff, there's probably an imbalance of output that needs to be addressed, which for that to be done, the improvement in national defense probably needs to happen. But this is again, it's really not appropriate to talk about here. Um, yeah, so the, I think I've covered it